What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. Angela and I today are going to be talking about the impact of social media on the careers of professional athletes. It's a topic that I think gets not a lot of light on it, as it is something that has continuously grown over the last couple decades. And we see so many sort of influencers come out of the professional sports world. I think it's amazing how people are balancing both of those worlds. So I want to take a look into kind of the role that social media has played in our life, not only in access to highlight videos and things like, all we watch is name our highlights, and what that's done to sort of the culture of football as youth soccer goes in the world, especially growing up, both of us in America. I don't know, it changes your perspective on what actual football and long-term football looks like. We see so many stars on social media posting their, you know, what color is your Bugatti type vibe, like who's got the Lambos and the Ferraris and all this, the planes and, vacationing in crazy places and diamond rings and all this stuff. And that's what, a lot of kids nowadays are growing up with, that as like, that's what professional football looks like. And that's not 0.00001% of the professional footballers on earth that actually get to experience that type of wealth and success and, the flashy stuff. So maybe we start with, like, I don't know, what's your view of social media and football? How has it affected you and your kind of perceptions of what football was growing up, and what sort of exposure did you get early on to footballers in social media, or just football in general in social media?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely weird for me because I remember around like 8th grade is when Instagram became a thing. And then from there, I mean, after that, everything completely changed. Before then, it was Facebook a bit, and there wasn't really as much like footy content you would see around. Um, that being said, I've always been a big YouTube guy. I've always loved YouTube. I've always loved watching soccer on YouTube. And I think that's kind of like what made it such a obsession and passion for me was watching guys like I remember there was like the free kickers. There's like a group of German guys who would just go out
Yep.
and like hitting knuckleballs. And then there's a guy named Jolter. And then it turned into like watching Matt Sheldon, um, Michael Cunningham, who then turned into a teammate, which was pretty funny. And then when you started making videos, even though I was older, like, and I still do now, like I'll just watch the videos because it's like it's cool to see somebody else doing something that you're interested in and passionate about. So I think in that sense, social media was such a blessing to have YouTube. And then also in terms of now, like you want to look at tactical analysis, you want to watch every time Christian Romero touched the ball versus Brazil, like there's going to be 10 marked up compilation videos. So I think like there's certain platforms, but I think there's always like for anything in life, like you can take things to an extreme. And that's where I think you also see like an Instagram and Twitter come into play as well. Um, Instagram is like, and you hear people say it all the time, it's like the highlights of people's life. But especially when you're maybe not feeling 100% and you're seeing people sign contracts or seeing people playing in front of these and all these stadiums, it can definitely have an effect on you if maybe you're not where you want to be in your career. So I think that's kind of where the dangers come in, is that that comparison starts coming into play, and then that's when you can start leading to overthinking, anxiety, and just an overall frustration rather than just focusing on where you're at.
Do you think that
So
any of those creators that you mentioned gave you, now that you've been a professional, you've been a collegiate athlete, like you've done the steps now and you've ticked those boxes, do you feel like any particular creators you want to shout out in a positive way of really displaying actually what it's like to be a quote unquote pro?
yeah, I think Matt Sheldon does a really good job of it. Just because I think he's just a very authentic person. And like when you meet him, he is very authentic as well. He's the exact same person you meet on YouTube. I think you do a really good job as well. I think I'd say you two kind of like give the best overall view of what it's like, because it's not like, oh, let me hop in my like BMW and like speed around on the freeways after training or anything like that. But just understanding what it's like. It's a lot of routine, the same thing over and over every day, which a lot of people would think it's not. Um, so I think you two I'd probably say, and if I'm forgetting anybody, I'm kicking myself. But I think it for me it's always kind of been you two guys have shown the full view.
I think it's a little more elevated because of the level that he plays at and the money involved in it. But I do think Tafazoli does a good job as well of
Oh
actually
yeah,
even though he literally is driving a BMW and, he's racing around on the freeway sometimes, I do
right.
think he does actually a really great job being like, hey, here's what an individual session looks like. It's super simple. It's really, there's not much to it other than this is what we're trying to accomplish in this session. I think his channel is also unique in the sense of doing those mic'd up games, which is pretty cool. So it actually tells you
Mhm.
like what communication is like on the pitch. But no, I agree. I think Matt's done such a fantastic job of showing what, even though it's technically second division in America, which is an amazing level, you're still like a lower level pro compared in salary and in money compared to somewhere in Europe, like you're clearly going
Definitely.
to get paid way more. Like not that it's a comparison at all, but I reckon Tafazoli's on quadruple or 10 times what Matt's on,
Yeah.
just because of the way the systems work. And that's what is interesting about what media does to kind of the perception of what actually pro looks like. And then you come to a Flower City or you come to a NISA or a USL1 or NPL in Australia, and it's like technically you're still professional, but are you making a living wage? Sometimes yeah, sometimes no. And you have to figure out how to do that. And so it's an interesting situation to be in where media says this is what professional looks like, and then guys will dedicate every minute of a waking hour towards working towards something and get $1,000 a month to play USL1, and that's still technically, that's still a, on FOTMob and on
Yeah.
ESPN Plus and all that stuff, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so funny. That was the same experience for me. Is like I knew I was like, oh, it's gonna be a grind. It's gonna be all this. And the only experience I'd had in the pro level before leaving Gonzaga was going to like Portland Timbers 2. So like training at the Portland Timbers facility every day. And then before that, going to like football league and like championship level grounds for like a trial or like, you know, going to play a game there. So then when you're hit with the NISA stuff, you're like, wow, like this is not what you think it's going to be at all. Because you're even preparing yourself for the worst and you're still just like, wow, this is crazy. Um, NPL is definitely different because like you talk to a guy in NISA, they say, I'm a professional footballer. You know, it's in the bio. It's everywhere, which is fair enough. You are a professional footballer. Like that's what I would say you are. But then you come to NPL and it's like you're probably making like 3 times the money you were on. But then the guys are like, oh no, we're semi-pro. Like so it's funny, like, you know, it's funny when you get down to like the terminology of it or like however you want to present yourself. But at the end of the day, it's like if you're making your living from playing football, like, you know, I'd say you're a professional. Or if it's like one of the major incomes for you. Or maybe you could say it's not. I don't know. It's up to whoever wants to declare it for themselves. It's probably more for me though, like about how you really act. Because it's like, you know, if you could say you're a NISA professional, but it's like if you're out 3 nights a week, like you're not really. I mean, like if you're out 3 nights a week and you're not training because you're say you're injured because you're hungover, like you're not really a pro. But it's like, you know, if you're in NPL and you're making X amount, but you're training every day and you're taking it really seriously, like yeah, you know, that's your full time thing. So you can always shift it to however you want it to be if you really want to.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's an interesting conundrum too where I find this as a content creator, I'll get comments on stuff, which is funny because I guess I grew up with, parents who are always like, you have to work really hard for what you have and like you're not going to be perfect, but they were always trying to boost my self-esteem in a way that was sustainable. And so that translates then over to not really caring if I get negative comments on YouTube and more just being aware of them. But some of the
Mm,
negative comments that I do get are just interesting to look at because it's like, you'll hit a shot, or I'll show a shot that I scored in a training session doing some shooting, and the player will be like, the least you could do is hit top bins for us, or you should have just put in the top bins one. And it's like, that may be really entertaining to watch, and I'm sure it is because I used to watch those I mean, it's beautiful to watch, it's amazing, it's
yeah.
poetic, it's gorgeous, and also it's not realistic. And so if you're not, and I'm not saying you need to film yourself, but filming yourself, even as just for personal reference, even just to show your own improvement over time, I think can actually create a sense of reality around it, because of so much of the social media you're seeing. I've been firsthand with this stuff. It's like guys will spend an hour on one clip because they have to hit top bins in order for that to like make the final cut of a video. And that's great. It's just a different philosophy, I'm sure. But what that does do is that then shows the 10-year-old kid who's got literally no idea what the reality of being a full-time footballer is. And they go, holy crap, these guys are hitting top bins every single time. Like that's what I have to do. So it's either one of two
Yeah.
directions, right? They go the direction of, I'm so shit because I can't hit top bins like whoever, like pretend I did that, right? Like Noah
Yeah.
Kavanaugh can. Or the opposite is like, that's just fake, and they get sort of, I guess, negative emotional reactions from that type of video.
Mm, yeah. Mike Cunningham set a standard that's just unattainable now for everybody. So now,
And the crazy part is, yes, he is a creator that absolutely loves. For context, for those of you who don't know this, Michael was a teammate of both of ours. He's a very close friend of mine. Like, he's going to come visit and stay with us in Australia for a while. Like, he's a homie, so he'll understand when we've spoken about this quite a bit. But he is a creator who loves, because he feels he's more of a coach role. He feels like displaying the best case scenario is the best way to get across what he's trying to get across, which I think is totally reasonable. And also, the caveat to that is that Michael is also a very, very good footballer, which means when he does these drills, he's not spending 40 minutes on a single shot. He'll do the drill like once or twice, get a top bins effort, and call it a day. Like, he's that good. And also he's trying to display the best. So it's like an interesting, it's an interest. It's just like whatever your philosophy is. I have no judgment really on that from a content creation side, but I do think it is interesting. Like, nowadays it feels like more of that young generation are like, well, we don't even want to see what the reality of playing pro football is, because all we want to see is the entertaining TikTok versions of like what crazy knuckleball top bins bullshit you can do, right? Like,
yeah, man. How did you balance? I mean, it made me think now because I remember after training or before training, seeing
mm,
you and Michael out doing content, and I would be getting in there. I'd usually get there like 30 minutes after you, which was like an hour and a half, which is pretty crazy. But like, um, I don't know how you guys really balance that. Like, because I remember going in, I'm like, oh, I'm fucking shot today. Like, I hope we don't run. And then you guys are out there doing fucking drills. Mike's hitting top in, or, whipping them balls or whatever. And I think part of that is both of you guys' personalities of, wanting to train and improve, but also part of it is like you got this business that you have to uphold. You have to continue to make content. You have to keep putting food on the table.
yeah.
Like how did you balance that? Because like for example, like I had an 8 p.m. game last night, and I can't even imagine trying to wake up today and do anything film related. Like even getting like talking right now on this podcast, I'm like, like I don't know how you guys do that. Like, so what are like some of the struggles and also the positives of trying to, juggle both of those things?
I think it helps that the content creation, albeit it being a physical endeavor, is moving the needle towards a better technique in football or a better thing in the other profession that I have. So there's that piece of it, which is like I'm getting either physically more fit or whatever it is. I think there's also the side of it that I've built up a tolerance for that amount and volume of training that most people probably can't keep up with. And that's okay. Like, I'm not trying to pat myself on the shoulder, but it did take, I mean, when you saw Michael and I doing those stuff, Michael had been doing it for 7 years or something, 6 years, and I'd been doing it for 3. So, like, imagine doing an hour extra of what you're currently doing every day for 3 years. You're gonna like you build a tolerance for it. And
Yeah.
realistically, a lot of the drills that we would do for short form, long form, all that stuff were fairly were fair weren't as intensive as they might look on camera. And so
Right.
the idea is you get through it and you make it look really nice and for the video, and that's all that it's great. That's great. But in reality, like he and I are both, and you are the same way. Like you and I are both fit enough that we could knock through one or two of those sessions on camera and it would feel great.
Mm.
So yeah, and I think it also is like figuring out a schedule as well. We're not doing that on a Friday the day before we have a away game, right? Like that's
Yeah.
not it's not it's happening like the Monday or Tuesday so that we have a whole week to sort of decompress from that extra bit of load. So I think it's just time management and realistically like if you haven't universal you, not just you Angelo you, right? Like universal you, if you haven't found if you find the thing that really fires you up and you're working towards, usually you can get away with more training, less sleep, whatever, because of that thing, because you're so just excited to get after it. And so that's what the YouTube side continues to provide for me is that extra level of like excitement and fervor and just, oh, I want to go out and get after it, even if I do have a team session that I have to perform for afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because thinking about NISA compared to NPL, like I would much rather be a content creator in the NPL than in
Yeah.
NISA. Like, not only because you're not playing on concrete anymore, but like just the schedule and it seems like you'd be able to fit that in a bit better. But that's a whole other conversation. Do you feel like when you're being a YouTuber, people know who you are? Most guys you played against have probably seen your videos. Did you ever feel like you kind of got judged by coaches or teams because of that? The fact that you were doing YouTube, like, do you feel like it worked against you in a negative way or maybe in a positive way? Because you see some comments like when Matt signed for Detroit, it's like, oh, they're trying to get their social media up, which is just a ridiculous comment because he's been in the league for like a decade.
But it's also
But
true, which we can talk about. And I have a pretty strong opinion about this, but go ahead.
all right, yeah, you go.
I I think that a player like Matt who has proven himself in the league for so long, any team that buys him now is buying the media platform. At least that's how I would look at it. If I was going to buy Matt Sheldon, I'd be like, dude, I know he's going to perform. I know he's a good player. Clearly he's a good character. Everyone has good things to say about him. I've personally met the guy. Like I know he's a great dude. You have as well. Like he's a great dude. There's literally nothing you can say about him. So if you're interested in that specific position, you're like, am I going to take the right back that's got 750,000 followers across his social media platform, boosting brand, boosting revenue, boosting this, boosting that? That we could do a whole nother podcast, which I think we will at some point, on personal branding because it's extraordinarily important. Most of the teams nowadays are getting around the personal brand of athletes and why that's so there's not much of a stigma anymore. It used to be that way. And
Mm,
for some owners, I'll speak on my own personal example maybe in a little bit, but for the most part, everybody's excited to be around and acquire a guy like that who has a personal brand that's number one built on long-term slow growth and gains. So a guy like Matt is not only a good player, but he's showing why he's a good player, and his brand is very, very sustainable over the long period of time because he's not going through scandals. He's not doing viral content. It's very, very different from, say, a guy who's there's a creator, and this is not
Football
necessarily true.
entangled.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I'll
So
say it. Football
yeah,
entangled.
yeah, exactly. So like something like that where it's much more based on viral content, that's a little bit of a different thing. But look, if you're going to run a professional football club, both of us, I think more than most people do, understand it's a business and you have to make
Yeah.
money. And so what's going to help you make more money? 750,000 extra eyes.
Yeah. 100%. What about your personal experience with it?
Every team that I have been a part of, except for one, has been extraordinarily excited about bringing me in and helping boost their social profile. So, whether it was Maryland or Flower City or California, even, I had fans coming up to me being like, "Oh my God, we're so excited to watch you play. Like, we've seen you on, like, my son loves your YouTube channel, and we know nothing about your team except we've watched you." And like, that's extra money in the stadium. That's extra fans. That's extra eyes. It's a beautiful experience for me because it's like, thank you guys so much for being here. It's support for us as a team. But in the same capacity, it's like, that's awesome. And I think teams are recognizing that. The one team that didn't appreciate that had uh, an ownership group and a back office who operated in a way that wasn't conducive to um, I don't think they were doing business in a good way, period. And I think more eyes on that back end stressed them out. And so there's like a combination of a lot of things that were going on, including sort of some interesting characters in that organization that it just was like not it was like a deal breaker for them. And I was like, well, I'm going to choose the business that's making me more money than you pay me. So fuck off.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Crazy. Yeah, it's interesting how interlink, and you're seeing more and more guys start doing it as well.
Yep.
Um, Not only because they see like the revenue side of it as well, but it's in terms of just like having more eyes on you, it's always helpful. And I think for your career, it can be really beneficial also. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's it's an interesting one, I would say, because it does like kind of put in perspective having, it's the same as if somebody was working a separate job while playing professional football, except that job is how many eyes can I get on me at all times,
Right.
which is a
And
very, yeah.
yeah, I think with the NIL now as well in college sports, like social media now gets taken to like the next level as well because they need their social media to get the money. So it's like if you don't have a personal brand, you're not going to make any money as an NIL athlete unless you're a very specific case, but like they need you to post, they need you to uphold this image um so that they can make money off you and you can make money from them. So,
Keep going with that thought train. Do you think it's going to be beneficial, or do you think it's going to ruin what kind of sports are in general?
well, yeah, we could definitely do another podcast about this because it's so interesting. I mean, I think in one sense, like some people are really, gripping tightly onto this idea of like college athletics should be school and your sport and money. You don't need to worry about it because the school is giving you $1,000 a month, so you'll be fine. Which isn't enough to like live if you're coming from an environment where money's not coming in the back door as well. Like, um, but then, on the flip side of it, you have colleges making millions and millions and millions of dollars off of these basketball, football, baseball. I'd say basketball and football predominantly. making so much money off them, players seeing none of it, even though it's their faces that are people are coming for them, not for whoever the vice president of NCAA is, who's then going to take all the money and get a lake house. So like, I think there's a balance of it, but I also worry about just how we talked about this a little bit last time as well. Like a 17-year-old going into college, getting handed so much money, you're all turning pro then. So college is no longer college, it's pro. And so you're kind of losing that amateurism aspect of it. And I just don't know. I worry about like the athletes as well, but I also worry about um I mean, it's not really like you're going to play, you're not really going for school anymore. So maybe they should just make a new division for people that want to do that, I guess. Because it gets really weird too, because then it's like you're going up against a guy who's studying engineering and he doesn't make any money and he doesn't have any brand deals, and then this guy's like making 50K a month from a casino. It's really weird to navigate, and I feel like they would have to make like another structure within the NCAA to make it make sense. But maybe not. I don't know. It'd be really interesting to hear an expert talk about it. Because when I was at Gonzaga, right when the NIL happened, I was in the sports management degree, and all of my degree were making bank from the NIL, and we were talking about it in class, and you know, it was a little. I wouldn't say it was awkward, kind of like, you know, we were talking about like, is it good athletes and just in the back of the class, like chilling in their Nike Tech fleece that they just bought from their casino deal. So yeah. What do you think about it?
I think it's great that the money is being filtered into the hands of the athletes that are making the name for the school. And also, I think there's a way to do it without getting other stuff involved. Like, there's a
Yeah.
difference, I think, between an athlete at University of Washington or at Gonzaga promoting whatever the casino name is, like versus promoting the school itself.
Right.
So
Right.
that's an interesting one, I guess, because you'd think that a school that like Gonzaga, whose basketball success has been amazing, they're an amazing school at basketball. A school like that has enough money to quote unquote sponsor its athletes.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't that money just come from Gonzaga as opposed to third party places?
Yeah. The money management aspect of it as well is super interesting because it's like you're starting to
Mm.
flood people with thousands of dollars in this new environment like what we talked about where there's all these temptations and everything. I personally think if I were in that situation, it'd been really tough for me going straight in. Um, yeah. I had an NIL deal in college with a hot yoga studio. I wasn't getting paid for it, but
There you
like I
go.
was able to get free hot yoga and bring somebody with me every single time. So, uh, you know, I've got nothing bad to say about the NIL.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I think that's also where, if it's the same you see on social media, right? Like I am a fan of the concept of things are the best when they're earned over time. And I think that is the hard part about, somebody, it's the analogy of like somebody wins a lottery and then loses it in 3 years or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like the athletes, and you see this in the professional space. Matt's one, I'm one, Michael's one, Tafazoli's one, although he's kind of gone, he went kind of boom and then he's plateaued a little bit and is still growing. But it's guys like that, or like us, I should say, I'll take ownership of this, like that have built really slowly over time. So if you were to hand me a $10,000 a month, $50,000 a month brand deal right now, I understand what that would look like because
Yeah.
I haven't seen money that big in a brand deal before, but like I've seen recurring monthly revenue from brand deals before. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand how that flows. So I think that's where it gets really complicated because you're gonna have a 17-year-old freshman who has built a personal brand of their training or their whatever in whatever sport they are. Maybe they're like a tennis influencer and they've built this incredible personal brand and business around their tennis for 4 years of their high school. And so they walk into an NIL deal and they're like, yep, I'll have my attorney look over it. And people are like, what the heck? And then you have
Yeah.
somebody who's, posted 3 times in 2023 who's a 17-year-old that gets a $50,000 a month brand deal for the NIL. And then all of a sudden it's like they're hit with you have to learn business, you have to learn money management, you have to learn X, Y, Z. And this is where we can have a longer conversation about, formal 4-year education or 2-year education and like actually what it's doing for people as opposed to like real life skills.
Yeah.
But obviously this episode being about social media, it's like I think the value of understanding what it's like to build a business and a brand to put yourself in the best position when you get to that point is really, really important, even if you're not going to see money in high school building that brand until you're 18 or whatever it is.
Yeah. Maybe they should just put it in an index fund and they can't touch it till their careers are over.
Yeah.
NCAA, we'll have a chat soon.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Sponsor the pod.
yeah, very interesting stuff though. I think there's a lot of people that would have really interesting takes on it, including people that we know that, make money from NIL. So
Yeah.
uh, we'll definitely circle back to that on the pod at some point.
Absolutely.
Um, do you feel like you ever had reactions from your teammates when they knew you were filming that were like, get that out of here? Or like anything like that? I mean, when we were at Flower City, I never saw that. It seemed like it was something that was very positive.
Yeah.
Uh, but did you ever experience that? I mean, because you started your YouTube channel when you were in Australia, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, have you ever experienced anything like that from you trying to boost a online profile and also play?
Not really. I think there's been one or two people that what's funny is they'll act all great on camera and then I'll hear through, one of my close friends on the team like, dude, he was talking shit about you after about like what is he doing filming? This is a professional environment, blah blah blah. And it's like if that's the way it's going to roll, I'm not going to think twice about it because if somebody doesn't have the balls to come up and say something and be like, "Hey, I would prefer if you didn't film here." Whatever. Like, no
Yeah.
problem. I'll turn the camera off. It's not a big deal. Like, I genuinely am not going to think twice about it. But I think that, like, kind of behind the scenes, like, ooh, after the fact, that was weird. He shouldn't be filming. It's like, well, say something, please. Don't be,
Yeah.
don't be weird about it. I would say though that 99% of the guys that I'm around, that you're around, I mean, in some respects, like a lot of them have already done media days. A lot of them have already talked in front of an interviewer. You're doing a job that requires you to perform in front of people. So like a camera held by somebody who probably pretty well is like I feel like the least stressful thing in the world.
Right. Yeah. Unless you're like on a what are those things called? You got relocated, your identity changed, then you
Yeah.
probably shouldn't be too worried about it.
Yeah.
Witness protection. Maybe that was their issue. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's interesting. I think a lot of people would get frustrated if they're like jealous of somebody willing to put themselves out there. I think that would
totally.
probably be something. Um, but I mean, another thing is like if you're in a professional environment, if it's gonna be really professional, there's gonna be cameras there. That's kind of part of the thing with being like if you're talking about a real pro, like there's gonna be cameras everywhere. So, you know, but that's interesting. Interesting to hear. I would imagine like if you're losing a bunch of your games, I could see people, that's when cultures start to tank and people start to get frustrated with each other. But I mean, we lost a lot at Flower City at the beginning of the season. And it seemed like everybody that was a pretty unique situation that we were in too, though.
Well, and I filmed the year before and we didn't even hit double digit points. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy as well.
So
Very,
that's
very crazy.
and those guys were, I think again, but that goes back to the, are you filming really authentic content or are you filming for virality? Because that's a,
Yeah.
if you're trying to film viral and be all animated and then you go into the locker room and you're like, bro, we're losing or whatever, that's different from filming just like I would walk into any other locker room and they just, you see on camera what actually exists in the locker or at a session,
Yeah. 100%.
which I think at some level, the rise in social media and stuff, if anything else, I'm gonna choose to look at it and focus on, or at least encourage people to focus on the positive of a bunch of kids nowadays want to be media influencers and also want to be pro footballers. And in the process of trying to do both, they're going to film themselves, have film of themselves playing, be able to reflect on that play, and be able to improve much faster than maybe you or I could because you and I weren't filming each other or ourselves or whatever when we were 10. And that I think is a
Yeah.
really great thing. Whether they post that content or not, I don't care. But it's like that filming and being able to reflect and see how you're performing and stuff is actually, I think, a really great thing for the younger generations of players.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like there's any other byproducts that you imagine we'll see in 10 years of the players who grew up with constant streams of, Vinny Jr. on TikTok and shit? Like, you feel like we're gonna see any ramifications, positive or negative, from kind of the radical shift in the way that football is perceived and displayed on social media, including things like the All or Nothing Man Cities types documentary, like those are also, I
Yeah.
would say, are part of this conversation.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll just look at it from the negative side. I wouldn't necessarily call it a negative, but I think also when you highlight all these skills and the very best of plays, you kind of forget that what football is really made out of, which is just like the fundamentals. And there's maybe one guy on a team that's the piano player, and then maybe you've just got a team of piano players. Maybe this came from my YouTube, and I think it's very possible that it did come from my YouTube, but I've always been obsessed with like street football, futsal. And when I was younger, like the only thing I cared about was doing tricks. Like, what kind of tricks can I do in a game? I'm still sometimes in the back of my head, even when I'm playing center back, like, how can I throw in something absurd in this game? But I've
You're just a
kind of,
small-sided god with those tricks.
yeah, yeah. So like, I think that's kind of what YouTube does a little bit, which is, for me, it was like that's how I got hooked on footy, was because I was watching these guys do like street tricks and stuff, and it's like, this is amazing. This is the coolest thing ever. But I don't know. That was kind of my experience where it turned into like I just wanted to do tricks all the time. Um, which I look at as a positive now because I learned how to like integrate the other side of it. But like I wonder about the next gen, they only see guys doing like rainbow flicks, trying to embarrass people all the time and stuff. And then now with social media as well, it's kind of like, um, I don't know. I feel like what's different is like I was YouTubing like Ronaldinho and like um Berbatov or whoever. Now it takes the context a little bit. So I don't know if that makes sense, but like they just see like the one flick rather than like the intelligence to like get into that position and then what they did after that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like what gets
so
the
like,
click, right? Like the
yeah,
the Berbatov finishing montage or a deep dive into Pep Guardiola's, system.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I think the Instagram thing, what I've noticed from younger players is like they kind of try to become like those people they see on Instagram, and whether that's what they
Mm.
wear or what they say or what they do on the field, which is good to have role models. But I think at the end of the day, you want to be yourself and you want to be authentic to who you are. And I think that if you're always trying to be like that guy that you're watching on Instagram, you're not going to reach your potential, or your potential as a player and your potential also as a person. And you're going to live with a gaping hole in your chest, not to get too but like
This is
if
the
you're always
philosophy
trying to
master's program coming out.
yeah. But it's like if you're always trying to imitate the players that you see on Instagram doing whatever this or wearing that, it's like I think it's also important to like say maybe, what are my instincts and my gut telling me to do versus what I see on Instagram on the
There's a
field.
really interesting example of this. Recently, I was out at the field filming and doing some of my, fast footwork stuff with the ladder. And a dad came up to me while I was filming and he was very respectful. And I finished the set, turned the camera off, and he came up and he was like, dude, you have the fastest feet I've ever seen live. Like my son's 10 and I really want him to get like way faster feet. Okay. And I hope if he's watching this, he takes this like with the most gracious grain of salt. Like he has clearly very good intentions, but this is where social media and this is where those things don't match up because I did 2 sessions with this young kid, he's 10, genuine talent with ball control, passing, body feint movement. It was like coaching, and I don't mean to like over exaggerate it, but it looked like I was coaching a mini Busquets because he wasn't very fast. He was sort of average height, wasn't phenomenally athletic, any of that stuff. And yet there was still this pressure, whether it was from his dad and his dad got it from social media or whatever that was, that just sort of forced him into this mindset of, well, he has to be a much better player or an all around player or whatever it is. And my comment to the kid was I said, hey mate, like what do you feel like are your strengths? And representative of the actual talent he had, he goes, well, I think I'm good at passing and I think I'm good at, finding space and stuff. And I said, okay, beautiful. That's what we want you to do. And that's what we want you to accomplish in this sort of training session. And the difference between like what as a coach, I looked at this kid and I was like, dude, why would you be working on your footwork? Like, yeah, sure, it's a great thing to get more athletic, but you're already so far ahead of all your teammates in the passing, creating space, ball manipulation, first touch, all that stuff. I was like, why would you spend any time right now developing, like, sure, get fitter, get faster, whatever, but like, what's actually going to take you a long way? And this is, Ange, back to what you had said, right? Is like, you want to lean into the things that make you unique as a player. And that's what's one of those things like that really frustrates me about what social media does to younger generation players is they're like, maybe they're a Busquets type player, but they're like, well, I want to play like Vinny Jr. And it's like, you're not, though. That's not what your strength is. And I think that's where you see in these larger scale analysis the importance of looking at like a larger scale analysis and getting good coaching as a young player is like coaches that help develop those natural talents in those kids is like where you want to be because they're able to say, to look at a Angelo and go, yeah, dude, you've got amazing feet, but your defending ability, your heading ability, your passing and distribution ability is fantastic. Why would we have you spend an hour a day extra on your fucking footwork when we can make you into a really, really good center back or six? And that's where you're
Yeah.
going to go the furthest. And that's where like stories like this are always interesting to me because I'm like, this dude is so talented at a specific skill set. Why would he do anything different?
Yeah, that's really interesting you said that. Another thing I was thinking about as well is like people, there's this quote, it's like make your weaknesses your strengths. And I think it's really good. I think it's really, really good to do that. Um, but at the same time, I think that when you try to attack, you're constantly like scrutinizing every part of your game, and you're like, I have, and this may be a scorching hot take, but I think that when you're always like obsessed with trying to make your weaknesses your strengths, you kind of go away from what makes you good as a player. And I think that if you really hammer down like what you're actually really, really good at, and you're not obsessed with like trying to do an outside of the foot trivela on your like or like a trivela on your left foot, it's like that's really not that important. But like let's really hammer in what you're good at. And I think like when you can accept like, yeah, maybe I'm not the fastest player, I'll put in like 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes before a session to work on it. So like I'm progressively gonna make gains versus being like, okay, I'm gonna shift all my attention from what I'm good at to how can I become like an athletic specimen. And it's like that's where you start to get injured, you start to overtrain, you start to do this and that because you're going away from what your true essence might be as a player. And that's not to say you can't get better at those things, but it's like if you completely shut the door on what your strengths are, then those are going to start depleting. Um, and that's been a recent revelation for myself. It's like
Mm.
obviously you always want to try to get better, you always want to do this and that. But then there's also it's like if I'm gonna go 115% and then I'm gonna miss 6 games because I overdid my agility work, like why don't I try to go 90 for everything, or 95 for everything? And then I'll play every game of the season. And then those gains are going to smallly, not smallly, but over time, like they're going to add up rather than constantly overtraining because I'm trying to throttle my weaknesses. Then I'm out. Then I do that again. Then I'm out. Um, and I think that could be a culture thing, an American culture thing. I actually talked to Hassan Alahi about this, who hopefully
Yeah.
we'll have on the pod one day. But I think it's kind of an interesting paradigm shift to think about.
It's one of the things that, well, let's back up. Action item for young players listening to this: find a coach or ideally multiple coaches that have seen you play a lot of times. So in a lot of youth systems, ideally you'll have a couple different coaches over the course of your youth career, right? So go and ask them, hey, coach, thank you so much for all the time you spent coaching me. However you want to preface it, and be like, I'd really like to know what are the 3 things that you think I'm uniquely good at as a player. You ask that question to 3 or 4 coaches, and you'll get a really good understanding of how the coach sees you, ideally in a couple different systems or play styles or whatever. You'll be able to say, okay, now I get a really good understanding, if you don't have that self-awareness yet, of, ooh, okay, I'm gifted at X, Y, and Z. And so for then you can go back and say, okay, now I can go to the drawing board, and instead of going and focusing on doing 60 step overs in a minute in a training session on my own, I can go and focus on, yeah, okay, make it well rounded as a youth player, but really fine tune those things that when you are at, and this is where people really misunderstand what combines and stuff are about and what makes people stand out. It's the little things that make you uniquely gifted over other players. So it's, let's take, we played, I was, let's talk about a couple of our Flower City teammates, right? Like Luke Ferreira, for instance, not outrageously athletic. He's fine in the air, and I'm sure he would agree with us saying this, right? Like not great in the air, but like ball control, passing, dribbling, and his creativity were so much better than everyone else on the team. It was like that's his thing. And I
Mhm.
talked about this actually quite a lot because he and I played on a similar side in Flower City. He would drift over to my side because I talked to Jordy, our coach, about this quite a lot. It's like, as a player, you're trying to bring out the best in the players around you. And so for me, it was like, I said this in a couple of game analysis videos. It was like literally my entire goal for the first half of this game was, how can I get the ball to Luke in a position where he can be successful? Because he's the
Mhm.
guy whose unique ability is going to create an amazing scoring opportunity or an amazing on goal shot or like whatever it is. That's like his unique gifted ability. Um, you talk to another guy like Kyle Nelson, for example. He was one of our starting center backs, our co-captain. one of the, if not the most freak athletic human beings I have ever played with, and never wanted the ball. Never. Like that literally, and but there you go. But he knew his strengths. He was like, no, I don't want the ball. Give it to Angelo and give it to Moombi, who are way better ball playing center backs than me. And I'm just going to clean up defensively because I have the athletic ability and defending ability and aerial ability to do that. That was his thing. And so that doesn't just come from watching Neymar highlights, watching Ronaldinho highlights on social media. Like as we sort of wrap this one up, it's like, yes, you want to, for entertainment, it's awesome to watch those types of skill videos, but number one, ask your coaches, any coach that you've had in your history of playing, what are the three things that I'm really good at? And then number two is, based on those things, coach, thank you so much for that feedback. The second question I want to ask you as a follow-up is, who are the players you recommend I watch in order to accentuate those abilities and in order to really focus on the movements, specific movements that you see will best display the things that I'm uniquely gifted at.
100%. 100%. Well said.
Yeah, so that would be my piece of advice. Social media, as we'll see in the next decade or so, as you and I get older and retire and, start to probably get way more involved in youth soccer as well, is like how that effect is gonna, what sort of teams are we gonna come up against and coach, where the young baller wants to hit a knuckleball into the top bins and every other shot is a failure, even if it's just a pass in the back of the net, like,
Yeah.
whether it's that, or are we going to be in a generation of extraordinary footballers who have grown up watching every video online of every football analysis ever, and because they're watching so much and thinking about it so much, they get outsized benefit from it. Who knows? But the future will, obviously, hindsight's 2020. So
Time will tell.
exactly, time will tell. So that's gonna wrap up today's episode. I appreciate you guys being here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can follow us at Brace App on all the platforms: LinkedIn, X/Twitter, Instagram, and of course here on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever else we're going to post this to. And hope you guys have a
Rumble.
fantastic hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and we will catch you guys in the next episode.